Hello everyone and welcome to another Unreal Engine tutorial. In this video we are going to discuss the landscape system in Unreal Engine 5. We'll start by setting up our scene and by creating our very first landscape. Throughout the process we discuss the technical considerations you need to know about when you create your very first landscape system in Unreal Engine 5, including the editor. We clarify the difference between components and sections. We also talk about height maps and what makes a good height map, and of course recommended landscape sizes by Epic Games. We also learn how to apply landscape materials using set and make attributes via the material graph and all the considerations you need to be mindful of before you apply those materials. At the end, I will demonstrate also how to bring an external height map from a software package like World Machine to save time on sculpting. Just like any other videos, I have timestamps for each section. We have a lot to cover, so let's jump right in. All right, let's launch Unreal Engine. Just like any other videos, we are going to start with clean slate. Now Unreal Engine is loading. I'm going to go to games this time and a blank, and let's specify the folder. I already have UE5 lessons ready to go, so I'm just going to select that folder, and for my project I'm just going to call this landscape, and we're good to go. Starting content on, ray tracing off, and hit create. Now we're starting with a brand new scene, and obviously in the scene, unlike the film industry, for games industry we don't get a completely blank and brand new scene. I already have the bridge loaded up. We are going to talk about this amazing addition, but for now I'm just going to close the plugins, update, and you can see blank scene in games. You do get some assets because of the starter content, but at any point of time we can just go ahead, remove them, replace them, so on and so forth. We don't need this. We need to create a new level, brand new level. So I'm going to go to File and create a new level. Just so you know, create a new level, it's like creating a new scene. N for new, Control N does the exact same thing, and that's kind of my preferred way of creating a new level. We're going to create a empty level with nothing in it. I really don't want to have anything in here. So empty level, and I'm going to go create, and as you can see, it's completely dark. We've got nothing in the scene. Now we did talk about modes in the very first session, and by saying modes, that's what I'm talking about, where you can toggle between your select mode and landscape mode and foliage mode and mesh paint mode. For now, just try to memorize Shift 2, Shift 1, because we do toggle between select and landscape a lot. For now, I'm going to press Shift 2, and now we're in landscape. We haven't started with anything. Alt left mouse button, you can see I'm sort of moving around. I can go left click and go up and down with this QE. I can go in and out with W and S, and now gradually but surely I'm starting to reveal my landscape. Now if you look at this landscape closely, you can see although it's completely blank, but we have a few attributes in here, and we've got some colors in here. So a yellow color stroke, a green color, and if I zoom in, we get a slightly darker color. So let's discuss what these colors are and how they can play a role in what we do. I'm just going to bring the camera speed a bit higher, right click and S just to go all the way out, zooming out, and bring it to the center. And the reason that I'm explaining this right now is because once you create your landscape, you're probably not going to see this. So let's clarify what we have here. So the yellow color is the landscape edge that we have. Light green shows individual components. And these components define how big your landscape is. And within each component, we've got medium green color, and those are sections. You can see you've got section per component. If I kind of bring this a little bit to the right, you can see per component. Now we have 1 by 1, you can go 2 by 2, and all of a sudden you can see those medium green color. And then we have number of components. And we already defined number of components. You can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 by 8. You can go 7 by 7, so on and so forth. So you can actually tweak this landscape however you want to do. Now, why I'm talking about this? Because that plays a huge role in how you define or manipulate these numbers. You can see in the manage rollout, you can create a brand new landscape. You can remove sections, you can move the landscape, you can add spline to the landscape, so many things you can do. At the moment, they've been grayed out because you need to start from new. Now, when you start from new, you have two options. You can create your own landscape, which we will talk about first, or you can bring a height map from a file, which we will talk about after we finish this section. You can give the landscape a material. At the moment, we do not have a material. We're not even sure what type of material we want to give to this landscape. So usually you leave that off. And you've got location, rotation, and scale. And to be honest with you, I tend not to touch these three at all. So when it comes to translation, I leave these intact and I tweak things later. Now we have section size, and you can see section size says 7 by 7 quad, 15 by 15 quad. And if I change that, you can see our landscape gets bigger or smaller. So if you're planning on having a continent or a very big landscape, make sure to specify reasonably big landscape. And of course, number of components and overall resolution will help you to add more defined details, add sharper details. Now, one thing you need to be mindful of, I'm just going to reduce it to the default, which is 63 by 63. I'm going to go 2 by 2. But one thing that you need to be careful about with overall resolution is you can't just put in a power of 2 resolution. I mean, you can, but you may run into artifacts. As a matter of fact, I will do that at some point in this tutorial, just for you to see what type of artifact we're running into and how we can fix it. But it's best to use what Epic Games recommended. And all the recommended landscape size can be found here. I'm going to put the link in the description so you can see the overall size. The role it's playing is to maximize the area while minimizing the number of landscape components. Allows you to run your game more efficiently, and knowing what number to put in is going to be a huge time saver. For example, if I want to go 1 up from 1009, my pick would be 2017. So that's how you increase or maximize the landscape size while you're keeping things efficiently. So again, the reason I knew this because of this table, and I highly recommend you to kind of take a peek at that before you put in a random number in there, and that gives you how many components you have in total. So enough with that, let's go ahead and start. Probably I'm going to lower this to 1009 because I feel like this is way too much, especially right now. I just want to demonstrate things, so I probably don't need to have a super big landscape to begin with. So with that out of the way, I'm just going to zoom in a little and let's go ahead and create. As soon as you create, you will get a landscape. Of course, that landscape has nothing in it, and you get a height map. That height map is a 16-bit grayscale map which you can paint on, and every time you paint a white color, that defines the raised areas, and every time you paint black color, that defines shallow areas. The way that you do it with this brush here, and now all of a sudden we switched from manage to sculpt automatically, and you get this sculpt tool where you can just sculpt things and create mountains, create hill. We can have brush size. You can increase or decrease this brush size. You can increase and decrease the fall off, have a super hard brush or a very soft brush. And of course, hard brush is to just draw something really well defined with crisp edges. May not really work for landscape unless you have a very specific scenario in mind. And of course, we have total strength, how much the points are going to raise once I draw a stroke on this canvas. So you can change that as well. We get to change the profiles, we get to change the brush type and get a different type. And before we actually get ahead of ourselves, let's have a look at how we can actually set up light for this, because right now if I just switch to select, you can see this landscape of ours has nothing in it. We remember that we started with just a clean level with nothing in it, so obviously we need to bring in something. All right, let's quickly go through the lighting part of this tutorial. We've already talked about lighting in 3 separate videos, so feel free to check them out. But for now, I'm just going to go and use Environment Light Mixer to create my lights. First things first, what I need is a directional light. So I'm going to go ahead and create an atmospheric light. That directional light is there. Using this window allows me to put things right at the center. You can see X and Y at the center, which is good. I kind of like that accuracy. Right now I have nothing in the scene, so I don't need to worry about where I angle it. And of course, every time you create a directional light, you would like to go ahead and create sky atmosphere. Fantastic. I'm going to create my sky atmosphere. Now I have clear blue sky. The only thing that you need to now be mindful of when you create a directional light is you need to make sure, if I scroll down all the way under atmosphere and clouds, you need to make sure that atmosphere sunlight is enabled, so these two guys can react and connect. The second thing, well, I should say the third thing that you need to bring, of course, after these two, is to create a sunlight. Now, this sunlight allows you to have some indirect lights in the scene. Just so you know, if I delete this sunlight for now and bring an object into the scene, let's say I'm just going to bring a cylinder into this scene. I'm going to make this cylinder just ever so slightly big. So that allows you to see the impact of the skylight. Right now you can see the other side, the shadowy side of our object is pretty dark, right? So we know how to fix this. The way to fix this is to create a skylight. So I'm going to create a skylight, and as soon as I do that, you can see that it's getting the job done. You need to make sure that they're set to movable. So your skylight should be set to movable, and your sky atmosphere should set to movable, and of course your directional light should set to movable. If you're not getting any light building warning, then it means that you've done this correctly. Now this allows me to press Ctrl L on my directional light. So if I just move my directional light up so I can select it, pressing Ctrl L, you can see I can simulate day and night. Now the funny thing is, if I go complete nighttime, my scene is still bright. Somehow I'm still getting the blue sky scattering into my scene. And again, if you have watched my tutorial on lighting, you know that this happens every time that Skylight forgets to recapture the environment. Either you do this manually, or a much better solution when your light set to movable is to just click on real-time capture. As soon as you do that, your Skylight captures the environment in real time. So well, the environment is pitch black, so that's what you get in the scene. I'm going to press Ctrl L on my directional light. So I'm just going to select my directional light, pressing Ctrl L, and create the light. The one last edit I would do is just to get rid of this black area right underneath the sky atmosphere, and the way you do it is very easy. I can actually use my light mixer. You bring exponential height fog from your visual effects menu, or you just create exponential height fog from here, and done. You need to make sure that the fog in scattering color is set to black. And of course, you need to make sure that directional in scattering color is also set to black, and mine is set to black by default. Just double check. All right, lighting side of things is done. We now can successfully go Shift 2 and switch back to our sculpt tool and explore what these options do and how we can benefit from them. Before I do that, I'm just going to bring a character into the scene just to understand the scale of this scene. So I'm just going to go to content drawer, go add, and create add feature or content pack. I'm going to bring a third-person shooter so I can kind of replace that with this cylinder of ours. So I'm going to bring this guy into the project. Adding this guy into the project, you can see it added a blueprint into our content folder, which is fantastic. I can go ahead and close that, and I can close that. I can go to content drawer, and you can see we have a third person with a blueprint on it, and we have characters now with mannequins. Now we've got two type of mannequins UE4, which is the white guy, and mannequins in UE5, which is a more fancier looking type of character. For now, we need that guy to be static. I'm just going to drag and drop this mannequin here so we get a better understanding of the size, and I can switch back to select. For now, we can just hide our static mesh, the cylinder guy, which we don't need. Now this guy, basically what this guy does, gives us a benchmark, a scaling benchmark. I'm gonna zero her out really quickly and move her up, pressing the end on my keyboard to plant the character on the ground, and we are ready to go. So let's go to the next chapter and sort of explore how we can benefit from landscaping tools that we have inside the landscape editor. Now let's explore this sculpt mode, which allows you to sculpt the look of your landscape height map. Before I do that, I need to do some organization in here because we're getting too many folders and we don't even have our own folder, which is so uncharacteristic of Reza. So let's create a folder. I'm just going to create the like a parent folder, called this one landscape. We need to go in there and create 3 folders. I'm just going to create one maps or levels. Another one can be materials, because we are going to assign some materials, and another one is going to be textures, because we are going to bring some really cool textures. So in maps, we are going to save this very level. So let's actually do that right now. Save a current level as, and I'm going to go into landscape. I'm going to go into maps. I'm going to call this my very first landscape. Bit of a lie, but go with it. Save. So we have the landscape saved in here. That's good. We are going to bring some materials in there very soon, but for now, let's just go ahead in the landscape and see what we can do. Again, before I do that, I'm probably going to get rid of this cylinder. I really don't need that cylinder. I'm going to zoom in ever so slightly. So we have this character in here. And now let's go to the landscape. The first one is skull, and that smooths the landscape within the brush that you have. So you can see the brush size is massive. So I'm just going to move that. The total strength, how powerful the brush is, you can see I can just go ahead and create the landscape around the character. I can kind of hold, and as I hold, I can just add to what I have, right? So shift is going to push this down. So normal brush is going to raise, and if I press shift, it's actually going to push things down and create some interesting results. Now, this is a really manual way of working. Obviously, I can at any point of time reduce this fall off, bring the brush down, and that allows me to add a little bit of detail in here. So I can kind of go in there and gradually but surely add certain details in there. And that's why I will be showing you my preferred way on that later on. But for now, I'm just creating sort of a template. You can of course go in here and smooth out certain areas. Flatten is quite an interesting one. So if I go ahead and increase my brush size and create something really big, I can go in here with flatten and reduce my brush size again and flatten certain areas. You can see how this area is now quite flat. So that's another thing that you can do, and you can go ahead with smooth and just smooth out some of these areas and come up with some really interesting shapes. And basically that's kind of it, really. So you can kind of go ahead and with your Wacom tablet, obviously you get a much better result. We've got ramp in here, which is pretty cool. You select the first point and second point and you go add ramp. And if I select away, you can see we kind of created the ramp here. Now you can go with smooth and start smoothing out some of these areas, so everything kind of blends better. And you just add detail gradually but surely. Start adding details with this fall off brush size and the strength of the brush. That's how you basically add details. Erosion does a really good job at kind of creating the erosion effect, as the name suggests, which is kind of useful. You can kind of create big dips in your environment like so. Noise is another useful one. I can kind of increase the strength of the noise and bring the brush size to a reasonable amount, and you can see that kind of adds a little bit of detail in there. Oh, that's way too much. I can kind of scale it down, and you can see how it sort of adds some details to what I have. So basically that's it. You need to constantly be mindful of the camera angle that you have. If you're in a gameplay, I would suggest that you kind of bring your third person and kind of walk around the environment and see how you can kind of explore it. Is that going to be useful or not is totally up to you. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to add a little bit of detail to this, because right now I feel like there's not much details in there. So I'm going to speed up the video and add a little bit of detail just to have a little bit of fun. So as you can see, I'm kind of trying to add definition to this, but again, there is it's a very time-consuming task, and there is not much that you can sort of do to get what really works. Of course, this is very low resolution, and because of that, I need to add to the resolution. You can see by these checkerboards how low res this landscape is, and it doesn't matter how hard I try. You really need to understand the terrain creation setup to be able to pull this off. That's why manual working or manual approach to landscape can be very tedious and risky, for lack of a better word. That's why what I suggest is, now we know how this landscape gets created through manage and new, and we can create a new one, just like that. My suggestion is to bring one from a file. Now, how to bring landscape from a file is a different story. So if I go in here, and for now I'm going to minimize this. This application is one of the application packages that you can use to create your own landscape. So it's a very easy to use application. I may actually put together a tutorial on this. You won't believe how simple it is to create terrain with few clicks and get landscapes like this. So World Machine is what I really prefer to create landscapes. I've already gone ahead, and if I go into miscellaneous folder, Heightmap, I've already gone through the process of creating a few ones. This is a lake. This is a landscape that I made. This is just a mountain, and it's a really kind of rocky, steepy mountain. And these are the height maps that I generated inside the World Machine, and I make them available to you guys. I put the link in the description below, so whatever you would like to use, you can just download them and you can use them. So let's see how we can make use of height maps, importing a new height map inside Unreal Engine 5 and put that into practice. Now we know how to create a manual landscape through the editor, manage and new. Let's go ahead and select this landscape. I'm just going to press delete on it, and let's create one from scratch, but this time using an import button. I'm going to go import from the file, and it says Heightmap file, and I'm going to click on the browse, the three dot button. I'm gonna go to miscellaneous, and I'm gonna go to Heightmap, and I'm gonna actually get this landscape. That's the first one I created. Now right off the bat, you can see that it brings all the details automatically. So it's actually a very big landscape that I made inside World Machine. It's 127 section to 127 section, and number of components are 17, so it's pretty big. However, the overall resolution is 2160 power of 2, but not what Unreal Engine recommends. If I go ahead with import, I just want to show you what happens if I import something with wrong resolution. I'm just going to go ahead and import. Everything looks good, but as soon as I zoom back, you can see the stretching that is happening actually around the map. So you can see all this stretching that is happening around here, around here, around here, and around here. So not a fan, to be honest with you. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to press delete, and I'm going to show you a trick to fix this. So I'm going to bring the exact same map actually again, but this time I'm going to reduce only one. So going 16 component to 16 component, and I'm going to press import, and voila, it actually fixed the issue. Bit of a hack, kind of works. Well, actually not kind of, but actually works and does a pretty good job. This little fella is way off, probably the position of this guy. So I probably need to bring the character down. So I'm just going to try to plant the character on the ground. Now, the only thing is, I feel like this landscape is massive and the fog height is really, really high. So what I usually do with this landscape, the first thing I'm going to do in here is to reduce the Z scale. I try not to touch the X scale and Y scale and just reduce this Z scale to, I don't know, something like 40%. The fog is massive, so I'm just going to go to select, bring the density of the fog down ever so slightly. I'm going to press End on the keyboard to kind of plant the character on the ground, and now you can see how beautiful this environment is. So in no time at all, really, by importing just a simple map, we managed to create this amount of detail inside our environment. And that's why I actually I'm a huge fan of the second way of creating landscape, creating the height map and bring that in. And the reason that I manually started modeling the landscape or generating the terrain was to kind of show you that it can take a really long time and the reward at the end is not really there. Whereas with just bringing the height map, you can get a really, really, really neat result in no time at all. All right, that's the modeling part of the landscape generation. So let's go to the next chapter and let's talk about, now we have this, how we add material to this. All right, let's see how we can set up our landscape material so we can make use of the third tab in our landscape editor. In order to do that, I need to set up my materials first. So I'm going to go to content drawers, and of course we have maps where we stored this level. Speaking of which, I may actually go and save all. Then we have material. In that folder, I'm just going to right click and create a material. I'm going to call this m_landscape, M for material, and I'm going to create an instance from that. MI for material instance and landscape. In case if you're unfamiliar with instancing and how to parameterize your attributes, feel free to jump into my Unreal Engine series and find the parent versus instance material where I explain all about it. Now with my landscape material, we need to set up our main attributes for this. Now I'm not going to assign that material just yet. I would like to make some progress in there, parameterize some attributes, and at the end drag and drop the material in there. So I'm just going to double click on it, bring my material landscape, and with that I can probably go into my landscape and go to textures, and best is to bring some textures in. So I'm going to go to import to games landscape, go 2 levels back, and I've got some textures ready to go. So ground textures, I've got some textures. I'm going to bring that in. Feel free to bring in your preferred textures or some textures from the starter pack. You can see that Unreal Engine identified those normal maps, great. And that reminded me to have a quick look at the color space. So I'm going to click on the ambient occlusion in here. You can see sRGB is on. We want this to be off and save. The grass, the green part has to be sRGB, so that's good. Normal has to be normal, which already been detected. Roughness needs to be linear, so I am going to save. Again, we talked about this in our material video. sRGB for AO, nope, we don't want that. We want this to be linear. For the ground, sRGB is on, and normal is normal. We already talked about this. sRGB should not be turned on. I'm going to fix that. AO for the mud needs to be turned off. The sRGB channel should be turned off. sRGB should be on for color. Normal is already been set, and linear should be set for the roughness for the mod texture. Now we have everything ready to go. You may say, Rezo, well, we know this part. We just bring everything and connect it to this landscape material. But I'm going to show you a different way of creating a landscape material, and that is by turning this to an attribute, basically collapsing this window to a single input, which accepts the incoming data from make material attributes and all the landscape attributes that we have available. Now, in order to do that, I'm just going to turn off the content drawer to make ourselves more space. In order to do that, I'm just going to select this main material, and I'm going to go into use material attribute, and I'm going to turn this on. As soon as I do that, as I said, we're getting only a single channel, and that single channel gets connected to a landscape material that allows us to blend different materials. So bear with me, it gets actually quite easy in a second. So in order to connect these textures to something, so if I go to textures, I've got, let's say, a green, which is a color map. We have a ground, which is a color map. And then we have mud, which is again a color map, where we should connect this. Well, there is a node, since we've already lost, if I turn off use material attribute, since we already lost metallic, specular, roughness, anisotropy, so on and so forth, there is actually a material that can bring these attributes back. That expression is called make material attributes. And you can see make material attributes bring all of these attributes back, the attributes that we missed as soon as we collapsed the main material node. Now, this is called landscape node. That's the parent node that everything gets connected to. And we can have as many make material attributes as we can. So I can have 3 make material attributes, like so, and just go in here and say, all right, sRGB to base color, sRGB to base color, and sRGB to base color. Okay, well, should they all go in there then? If I go and connect this in here and connect this in here, you can see one is going to disconnect the other one. So how can we blend them together? Now, while there are ways to use typical expressions in Unreal to do so, and we've already looked at some like multiply or lerp node, there is actually a node that is just the right node or expression for landscape texturing. And that node is called landscape blend expression. So I'm going to bring layer blend expression, and that's the job of this expression, to blend any material that you may have. So I can just hold down Alt and disconnect and go in here. First things first, I need to define how many layers I would like to blend. So the input, the number of inputs are important. I'm going to select this, go to the details. I've got layer, and I've got the array elements where I can just add any layer that I want to connect. So I've got 3 materials. I need 3 layers: layer 0, index 0, index 1, and index 2. You can see we've got layer none, layer none, layer none, representing these 3 index values. I'm going to expand one of them, and I'm going to call this green. And that represents this green map in here. And sure enough, the first one is called now layer green. I'm going to very quickly do that for the other ones. I'm going to expand index 1, and I'm going to call this ground, which is a brownie color, layer ground. And of course, I'm going to go to the third index, and I'm going to call this mud. Now I have 3 inputs for 3 materials that I have, and rest assured, I can just drag and drop them in here. How simple is that? And the output of the blend goes directly into the landscape. That's it. I can go apply to compile the shader, and that will have an impact on the instant shader that I've previously made. However, this, although it's quite valid and it's working, and from now on I can go in here and bring in more channels. I've got roughness, I can bring roughness in here. I've got ambient occlusion, I can bring it to the ambient occlusion channel, and I've got normal, I can bring it to the normal channel. Although this is valid, it leaves me with lots of unused attributes, and that's rather a very long list. So I've got a node that I would like to introduce to you guys, which serves the same purpose as make material attribute, and it allows you to define a set of material attributes and pass them on to bundled data as a single wire. In our case, a layer blend expression. The only thing that you need to be mindful of is you need to know what channels you're going to target before you create it. Well, in our case, it's actually fairly straightforward. We know that it's ambient occlusion, color, normal, and roughness. But if you're still playing around with the idea and not sure, you may add refraction later, you may add specular later. Best thing to do is just to stay with this make material attribute. Now, the one that I'm going to introduce is called set material attribute. So I'm just going to press the tab. I'm going to go set, and the first thing that comes up is set material attribute. Right off the bat, it doesn't give you any attribute, and you may say, Reza, you said it's a replacement. That's the main reason we created this make material attributes, to have access to these channels after all. Well, the good thing about this is you can actually specify how many channels, what channels you would like to have on set material attribute. Pretty cool, huh? So you can go to details, attribute set types, and I need 4 arrays, one for color, one for normal, one for roughness, another one for ambient occlusion. So click on this plus sign 4 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and we already have base color, we already have roughness. I can actually go in here and pick roughness, and then go in here and pick normal, and go to my third index and pick ambient occlusion, and there you have it. Now all I need to do is to replace this node with our new set material attribute. I'm going to go and plug base color to RGB. Nothing has changed. We're still dealing with the same material attribute, but just look at how much clutter we have with this guy, and how efficient and clean this this expression is. So I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to get rid of this, and very quickly get rid of this and replace them with this new set material attribute. So base to base, and material attribute to layer ground, and I'm going to create another one, Control C, Control V, RGB to base color, and output of the set material attribute to layer blend, and we're all sorted. Now, the easy part, all I need to do is to bring the ambient occlusion, bring the roughness, and bring the normals for each set material attribute and plug them in. Now that is done, I've got all the materials set up. I would like to have access to their tiling as well and parameterize them so I can use them in my instance material. So the process hasn't changed. You can definitely use texture coordinate. So if I go and type in coordinate, you can use texture coordinate to your advantage and use it in conjunction with a normal constant. And I'm going to press M and left click to bring a multiply and basically do that and parameterize this guy as your tiling, and that goes to your UVs. What I suggest is instead of texture coordinate, use landscape layer coordinate. So I'm just going to plug that in. Now you only need to use this once because, well, these guys can be repurposed. So I can actually select these two, Control C, Control V, bring them one for the ground, and Control C, Control V, bring one for the mud. Now that goes to these UVs, so I can just select the UVs, and every UV gets plugged to this multiply, because if you're changing the tiling for your color map, obviously your ambient occlusion should follow, your normal map should follow, and your roughness should follow. That's why we're repurposing this. Same in here.
I guess you're back. Are you gonna tell me where you went? All the messages I sent with no reply. It's like that. You're just gonna walk into my room. I hate how you assume I'll take the pleasure and the pain, the sorrows in your brain, 'cause I know you're on the run. I'll take the pleasure and the pain, your secrets to my grave, 'cause you are the only one. 'Cause you are the only one. The only one. 'Cause you are the only one. The only one.
Now that's way more organized. I actually quite like the way that this is coming along. All I need to do is to parameterize rather that. So to parameterize that, I'm going to go to convert, and I'm going to call this green underscore tile. So now this shows up in our material instance as a value, a parameter that I can play around with without compiling. I can do the same thing here, convert to parameter, and can call this ground underscore tile. I'm going to move down and right click, convert to parameter, and I'm going to call this mud underscore tile. So I'm going to go apply, and I'm going to go save. Just out of our own curiosity, if I go to content drawer and go to material, double click on the landscape, but the instance one, you can see I have the tiles in here ready to go. So at any point of time, I can turn them on and get to work. Now, just be very mindful of the fact that right now there is absolutely no tiling, and usually the default for that is 1. So I'm going to set that to 1. I'm going to save, so there is no surprise. Always check the default value. You can set your default value, of course, but right now the default was set to 0, and we don't want that. All right, now everything looks set, ready to go. Let's see how we can apply that material that we made to the landscape. The process is actually fairly simple. All you need to do is to drag and drop landscape material in there. Now, first glance, you would be like, hold on a second. Didn't we all of this to see something in here? What's going on? Well, first things first, I'm going to save and apply, right? Now, the process is you need to go to paint. As soon as you go to paint, under layer, you see these 3 materials. You need to create your base material and paint whatever material you would like to have on top of your base material. Now let's get to work. We need to decide which material gets to be the base. I would like the mud to be the base. Now you go in here, you create layer info, and you go weight blended layer as normal. And it asks you, where do you want me to save what I'm about to do? It's usually, it creates a folder under your map folder or levels folder, wherever this levels currently resides. And usually don't touch it. Usually don't remove it. Don't rename it. Just leave it as is. I'm just going to go save. And as soon as you do that, you get the base layer working for you. Now, if I zoom in, you can see we need to really do something about this tiling because it's just ugly. Well, lucky for us, we have access to the material instance tiling attribute. We actually made this for this reason after all. So I'm going to go to mod and I'm going to set this to 0.5. Yep, looks definitely better. 0.2, maybe 0.1, and now we start getting some really good results. I'm actually going to take this to a next level and maybe go really big on this, something like that. So looks a lot better actually with the correct amount of tiling. Now it's time to go ahead, and I'm just going to move that to the next monitor that I have. Now it's time to go ahead and just start painting on the areas that we want. So let's say I want the sort of raised areas to get more of a ground, and in between crevices I would like to get green. So I can select green and I'm on paint, right? So you can see I've got brushes here ready to go. I can actually move in here and I can start drawing. But before we do that, again, we need to make sure that we create that layer info. If you don't do that, this is what you're going to get. So you're going to get this layer has no layer info assigned to it. So that's your cue to click on this plus to create a layer info, weight blended, so you can actually blend this with other layers. And I'm going to save. And now if I click with the, of course, I need to select the green. You can see I'm going to let this compile, and now you can see I'm getting some results. Now, brush strength is one thing, brush fall off, size, all of these are going to sort of apply. I can go in there and in between crevices, I can just, or the base, I can just get some green. And again, how you are going to tweak this, how much blend you're gonna apply, it's totally up to you. Obviously, if I zoom in, you may realize, I'm just gonna zoom in really quick, you may realize that what you have again does not have the tiling that you want, which is sort of a problem. So let's go in there into our content drawer, into our material and landscape, and start tweaking what we have. So I'm just going to tweak the size of this to something like this. Oh, that's way too, yep, something like that should really do the trick. And you can see how nicely this now blends. If you don't want to get any fall off, totally up to you really. So for example, I just want to kind of minimize the fall off and increase the intensity, and you can kind of get something like that. And you can go with smooth and sort of smooth the edges out a little bit. There are a lot of smart materials out there, by the way, then these materials do help you to get a much better result. But for now, I'm just gonna go ahead with a few tweaks. So that really should do the trick for this example. You can see that we are actually adding bits and pieces to this, and just, you know, your artistic discretion, your artistic decision, how you would like to create something like that. At any point of time, you can just jump out of this into scale, select your directional light, and start rotating it. So I've got my directional light and start rotating my light to see if I can get a better result. And I can select my mannequin and have a look at it and basically look at the environment. I can go to exponential height fog and just increase or decrease the height fog just to add a little bit of personality to my scene. And all of these changes go hand in hand, and obviously and it's based on the reference that you may have. But that's basically it. That's how you create material using everything and anything we've learned so far. So if you think about it, we're actually using material instancing. We are using what we've learned in material, starting with color space, how to plug things, how to unplug things. The only difference is we use landscape coordinates as opposed to texture coordinates. We use a very useful expression called set material attributes, and of course a very useful node called landscape layer blend. And we also learned how to make use of material attribute. So a lot of new things that we talked about, which is going to add layers to what we already know about material, but this time for landscape. Now, I hope you found this video useful, and I hope you use these tricks in your own projects. But that should do the trick as an introductory session. In the next stop, we are going to talk about Quixel Megascan, actually. A very, very nice addition to Unreal Engine 5, which is now embedded inside the application. So let's go to the next video and see what's in store for us when it comes to Quixel Megascan. Thank you very much for your support, and stay safe. See you in the next video.